In this video, I will give you 11 tips for the REG exam that will help you beat this beast of exam. So, keep watching. Hey future CPAs, this is Ala Wadaya. I'm a licensed CPA in the state of Colorado and I help students pass the CPA exam and become CPAs. If this is your first time here and you're interested in becoming CPAs, start by subscribing to our channel and clicking the bell in order not to miss any of my videos. The REG section of the CPA exam is challenging, especially for international students who never took US taxation courses before. The regulation section primarily covers 3 topics, which are the business law, ethics, and federal taxation. The topic that receives the most attention is federal taxation in its various forms, which makes the majority of the exam. There are some general concepts, however, that can help you simplify much of the test detail. Here are 11 regulation exam tips to help you beat this exam and pass it from your first try. Tip number 1. Spend more time on federal taxation procedures. Between 55 to 85% of your exam is going to be based on federal tax procedures of property tax transactions, individuals, and entities. You want to make sure you're taking this into account while you are studying. I'm not saying not to study business law, ethics, and professional responsibilities. You should study these as well. However, give federal taxation most of your study time. The regulation exam question tests 3 content areas under federal taxation. The first content area that is tested is the federal taxation of property transactions, which makes up from 12 to 22% of the exam. The second area is the federal taxation of individuals, which makes from 15 to 25% of the exam. The third area is the federal taxations of entities, which includes the S corporations and the C corporations and the partnerships, which make up from 28 to 38% of the exam. These are the areas you should take the time to dig into and understand. With that said, make sure to give federal taxation most of your study time. For me personally, a big mistake I did when I studied for the REG exam back in 2010 was focusing on business law and leaving taxation until the end. So I gave business law more time than needed, and then I got stuck in time when studying for the taxation to realize that I did not give it enough time to study and that I am not properly prepared for this section of the exam, which caused me to fail the REG exam twice. Especially that I never took any US taxation courses before. Tip number 2. Make sure your REG study materials are up to date. Starting January 1, 2019, the REG exam started testing the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which will affect all federal taxation areas. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which we abbreviate as the TCJA, has been the most significant change to the US tax code in over 30 years, and it has impacted the REG section of the CPA exam. One of the big changes this act made was eliminating personal exemptions. At the same time, the TCJA increases the standard deductions substantially. For example, the standard deduction was increased from $6,350 to $12,000 for single taxpayers. Also, under this act, few people will now pay the alternative minimum tax due to higher alternative minimum tax exemption levels under the TCJA and phase-out levels. This act also made major changes to federal taxation of entities by putting a 21% flat corporate tax rate. There are also changes to taxation of property transactions and changes to different tax elements, including estate tax, gift tax, non-recognition transactions, entertainment expenses, net operating losses, and many other items. Pay attention to the tax updates and study them and make sure your materials reflect these changes. Tip number 3. Practice multiple choice questions and simulations. The AI CPA wants to know you can perform tax preparation and other services commonly required from you as a CPA. So, to pass the REG CPA exam, you'll need to become familiar with the tax law, but you will need to do more than just memorization. So, it's not about memorizing the material, it's about understanding the big picture of the tax preparation and business law and spending time working through questions and simulations that will let you apply the rules you've learned. You're expected to show you have the skills to provide tax preparation and advisory services. There are usually two types of questions you will see on the regulation exam when it comes to taxation. The first type of questions is the questions that will ask you to recognize where an item is reported for tax purposes. For example, you may be asked to determine whether items are included or excluded from net income, or you will be asked to determine whether items are deductible or non-deductible from income. The second type of questions you will see under the REG exam are the questions that will test your problem-solving skills. So you will have to apply your information and use your critical thinking to draw conclusions. So that's why I recommend you work multiple choice questions and task-based simulations yourself and not only read the solutions in order to develop your problem-solving skills. For questions you get wrong, read the answer explanations again to learn what you did not understand and solve more questions on areas you are weak in. Make sure also to practice sample REG tests in the AICPA.org website, which represent previous CPA exam multiple choice questions and task-based simulations. Tip number 4, understand contracts. When you think of contracts for the purpose of the REG exam, consider whether or not each party gave something up to enter into a contract. A party may make a monetary payment or make a promise to do something. Contract law considers what a reasonable person would think about a particular transaction or event, and the courts substitute quasi-contracts to prevent one party from taking advantage of another. Make sure to understand these 3 types of contracts that are tested on the regulation exam. The first type of contract is the express contract, which is when 2 parties make either written or oral promises to each other, and this forms an actual contract. The second kind of contract is the implied in fact contract. In this case, the behavior of a party creates a contract. One party's action leads the other party to reasonably believe that a contract exists. If, for example, the telecommunication company schedules a date and time to visit your home, the telecommunication company would reasonably expect that you would pay for the telecommunication services provided. The third type of contracts you must know is the quasi-contracts. This is not an actual contract, but a court may substitute a quasi-contract if the court decides that one party would be injured if no contract were put in place. If, for example, a delivery company drops off a new coffee machine at your door by mistake, and you started using the coffee machine, a court may determine that you have been unfairly enriched. You have profited at the expense of another party without attempting to make compensation. A court may substitute a quasi-contract in this case, and you'll have to pay for the coffee machine. Tip number 5. Understand the authority and professional responsibilities of agents. The relationship between an agent and a principal is a business law concept. The REG test has several questions on the authority and professional responsibilities of agents. Pretend, for example, that John manages a work crew for Tom's cleaning service company. John's authority to act as an agent for Tom can take several forms. The first form agents can take is the actual authority, which is when the principal's words or action cause the agent to reasonably believe that he or she has the authority to act. If Tom tells John to clean the house, Tom has actual authority. The second kind of agents you must know is the apparent authority, which is when the principal's words or actions would lead a third party to reasonably believe that the agent has authority to act. Tom meets with Mary, a client, and tells her that John's crew will clean Tom's home. Mary reasonably believes that John has authority to select the specific rooms in the home to be cleaned. The third kind of agency is the implied authority, which is when the agent can be reasonably expected to carry out certain duties as part of his or her actual authority. When John cleans the windows of Tom's house, he takes the windows down and lays them on the ground so that he can properly clean them. When the windows are cleaned, John returns them back. John had implied authority to take down the windows. Tip number 6. Learn the individual income tax form 1040. The regulation exam includes a lot of questions on individual income taxes paid through Form 1040. Furthermore, studying this REG exam topic requires a great deal of focus. To understand the big picture and pass this exam section, print off a Form 1040 individual tax return and scan the line items in the return. Make sure also to be able to calculate the qualifying business income deduction for federal income tax purposes as required by the REG Blueprints. Here is my tip to help you learn the Form 1040. As you work practice questions on individual taxes, stop and confirm where the question topic is posted in Form 1040. A question about dividends, for example, would be posted to the income section, while an estimate tax payment would be recorded in the payment sections of the tax return form. Over time, you will be able to understand each section of Form 1040, and that will help you pull all of the individual tax ideas together. Tip number 7. Understand business formations and pass-through entities. The REG test includes questions on business formations, and you will answer questions on pass-through entities. Make sure to study the pass-through entities and the business formations for partners, C corporations, and S corporations. I recommend you study business formations after studying agency because it makes more sense to you since business formations are extensions of the agency laws. The pass-through entities are the ones that pass the profits and losses of the business directly to the personal tax returns of the owners. The business entity may file a tax return, but the entity does not pay taxes on profit. A partnership is a pass-through entity because each partner's share of profits and losses is reported to the partner on Schedule K1. The partner includes the profits and losses on his or her personal tax return. No taxes are paid directly through the partnership return. Here is the trick when it comes to pass-through entities. Corporations, including the C corporations and the S corporations, are not pass-through entities because the corporations files a tax return and pays taxes on company profits. A corporation may then pay a dividend to shareholders, which is taxed as income on the shareholders' personal tax returns. Make sure also to understand the calculation of the tax gain or loss realized and recognized on a liquidating and non-liquidating distribution by both partnerships and corporations for federal income tax purposes, and make sure to be able to compare the tax implications of liquidating and non-liquidating distributions from different business entities. Tip number 8. Learn the independence and objectivity concepts and memorize these concepts too. The REG section covers issues related to the CPA's federal tax procedures and responsibilities to clients. This includes the need to be independent. With that said, studying for these topics can be difficult because you may get lost in all of the rules and miss the big picture. My tip here is that as you read through questions regarding independence and objectivity, think about how people must do business in other professions. Like doctors, for example, or lawyers. Of course, they must do it in due care. Keep these 3 points in mind as you study questions regarding the CPA independence and objectivity. The first thing you must keep in your mind is that a CPA must maintain objectivity, which means that a CPA is independent in fact and in appearance. In other words, the CPA does not have a bias when dealing with the client. As you read through the questions, consider whether or not the CPA benefits financially from a certain event or transaction in the business. If the CPA can benefit, it is assumed that the CPA cannot be objective and is biased. The second thing you must keep in your mind here is that independence is required when a CPA performs an audit of the financial statements. That requirement should make sense because the CPA is issuing an opinion, and a CPA who is not independent cannot issue an objective financial statement opinion. Other work, such as consultations or taxes, does not require independency. The third thing you must know, the due care. The accounting profession also requires CPAs to exercise due care, which means that the CPA must follow professional standards and gather relevant data to support the work provided to a client. Most professions have a due care requirement, and professional liability insurance requires policyholders to act with due care. A doctor, for example, must use due care to treat patients. And here comes tip number 9, which is very important. Practice time management strategies by solving sufficient questions and giving a time limit of 1.5 minutes for multiple choice questions and like 15 to 20 minutes for task-based simulations. Don't underestimate the importance of time management because you will get out of time if you do not practice time management strategies for the exam. Make sure to leave enough time for task-based simulations. To learn the time management strategies you must follow for the REG exam, watch this video which I gave you time management strategies for the CPA exam. And here comes tip number 10, which is the most important tip. Read the REG Blueprints, which tell you how each topic will be tested and the skill level that will be tested for each topic and the representative task that you must fulfill for each topic. There are 3 skill levels tested in the REG exam, which are the multiple choice questions that test the remembering and understanding, and the application, which can be covered either in a multiple choice question or task-based simulation, and the analysis skill, which is usually covered under the task-based simulation. So make sure that you study and fulfill each representative task for the related topic that are required under the blueprints. If you meet these tasks, believe me, you will pass the exam. You can get the blueprints from the AICPA.org website. Just search for the blueprints and you will get them. Tip number 11. Use real-life experience to understand the taxation process. Most of the taxation learning happens with actual experience. If you're planning to work in taxation, consider taking the REG exam after you've worked in the field for a few months. Even better, wait until you have had a busy season and then take the exam after a taxation busy season. This will make it much more easier to you to study and understand the tax concepts. To learn how to study after the busy season, watch this video which I gave you tips to help you study after the busy season. If you are an international student who never took US taxation before and never worked in that field, it's totally okay. I was like you one day. Comment below if you are an international student that never took US taxation before. I know that the REG is the most difficult part for international students. My advice to you is, give this section enough time to study. You will also need to study it more than one time in order to absorb the information. Also, study using bit-sized lessons in order not to get lost and to better understand and focus on the material. I know the REG exam is not easy and there are a lot of things to know about. That's why I made a guide, as a REG exam guide. So go ahead and click the link below in order to get this guide, which I summarized all the tips that you need to know for the REG. So go ahead and get this guide. It is totally free. This guide will help you during your REG studies and you can go through it to know on what to focus and to get the tips for the REG exam. Next week, I will give you the BEC exam tips. So make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit the bell to get the video. Watch these 2 videos to learn the FAR exam tips and the audit exam tips, which will help you pass these exams from your first try. Remember, go after what you want. Pass the CPA exam because you can become CPAs and save the world.